Yeah, so I guess to get a little bit started, to let people stream in a little bit more, so the reason that this panel exists is last year, literally last year, I'm pretty sure it was House of Chimeras that told me Therian didn't always mean earthen animal. And it opened so many doors that I have been just so over the moon and also extremely angry that I have been saying to just every single time I see earthen animal mentioned. It's just like, no. And that is why this panel exists. Yes, Chimeras, you are to blame. I also do want to mention that this panel would not have been possible without House of Chimeras, not just for like prompting me to do it, and also Orion Scribner, because their timelines were so important on finding primary sources that that are linked at the very bottom of the transcript. And if you guys are interested in learning more about what I'm talking about today, please start at those timelines. They're the very first two links on my sources and other readings list. Yeah, it is just after 4. I think we've got just about everybody that we're going to get. So let's get started. This is going to be a little bit different from my last couple of years of panels because those were very open-ended. This is very much going to be a lecture because there's so much for me to cover that I had to have a transcript. There's no way I could cover this and not have it structured. There's just no way. So, all right, let's start out with the introduction. For many individuals in the non-human community today, the terminology is learned by word of mouth from individuals that have resided in the community for longer and then pass on that knowledge to further newcomers. Such is the way for many communities, but as a method of information transfer, it can contribute to the loss and future lack of information. Such is the case of our beloved word, Therian. Today, I'm going to be talking about the evolution of the word from its earliest predecessor, the phenotype, to its current meaning of identifying as an earthen animal, and how it obtained this incredibly narrow and exclusatory meaning. My goal and hope is to bring solace and open new avenues to those who had previously identified with the term, but were told or had assumed they do not fit the definition. As a preface, just as we coin new terms today in order to better convey our understanding of what it is to be non-human, so did those in our past. To better understand what influenced the changes to our terms, we must go back to the very beginning of our recorded history in order to learn the roots of our terminology. Some quotes may seem oddly worded or tilted in cadence. Many older sources interweave therianthropy with totem animals, which are no longer discussed within Therian circles for obvious reasons. Full quotes can be found within the source links, but they have no basis on today's topic and thus have been omitted. Other terms, such as otherkin, are going to be mentioned in reference to how intersectionality has occurred through the years, but are not the focus of our gathering today. Some of the sources I will be utilizing must be understood as a product of their time, as our understanding of therianthropy has evolved since the community's first gatherings. Today's topic is not meant to be a commentary or a discussion on how the understanding of therianthropy as an identity and experience has evolved. Finally, everything that is going to be talked about today, I was not present in the community to experience firsthand. Instead, this will be an analysis of historical documents, including personal websites, forums, among other community gatherings. I do not speak as a total authority on this subject matter. I'm merely bringing to light what I feel with evidence, was maliciously made to be forgotten. Thus, I welcome anyone who was present in the community during the times I mention to correct any inconsistencies in my information. Our history is incomplete due to the nature of the internet, and I will happily accept any primary sources that alter or clarify the information that I have. And thus we start with our origin, Horror Werewolves. For those who don't know, Horror Werewolves was the website in which the Therian community can trace its originating roots to. While it is a name many have heard in passing, it is a product of a very early version of the internet. It's literally as old as me. Its name refers to its original purpose. It was essentially, as we would understand it today, a sub-forum that was dedicated to fans of the horror genre of media, specifically focusing on werewolves. Fans would gather at Horror Werewolves to discuss werewolf media, but it also attracted a slightly different type of fan. Through the first year of the group's existence, topics would be posted asking about real-life werewolves, some to the tune of claiming to be werewolves. Quote, anyone who feels the blood of the beast in them, end quote. While many users wrote off such topics as role players, discussions of the nature continued to trickle in numbers until shortly after the website's first birthday. A thread was posted by the owner of the forum himself, speaking about his interests in werewolves stemmed from wanting to get back in touch with nature and with his feelings of animality. This topic opened a sluice gate of further threads on the subject, talking about the nature of man and the buried feelings of the animal inside. A werebat by the name of Ron created a thread speaking about a dream in which he, as a werebat, was fighting a werewolf and stated, quote, sorry, werewolves of the net, it's nothing personal against your phenotype, end quote. This is one of, if not the, earliest surviving mentions of the term phenotype, and became the first term to be coined in order to discuss other werebeasts that were not wolves. Not long after, however, another thread proposed the term theriomorph, which is the term that Horror Werewolves FAQ would go on to use for years. Yet the words were and were-creature and lycanthrope continue to be the most commonly used terms amongst the community. A year after theriomorph was coined, a were-native spirit by the name of James created a topic stating that the continued word of therianthropy was confusing, and asked anyone beside me heard of the term therianthropy, which is a more general term for lycanthropy, end quote. This is the oldest surviving thread on Horror Werewolves that uses this term and gained many supporters to the point of being adopted as the term we know today. But as old habits die hard, the origin of our community being rooted in werebeast terminology and aesthetic produced the popular term, quote, wereside as an alternative to phenotype, and soon after the coining of polywere was the predecessor of polytherian. The term shifter referred to Therians of all sorts, but typically focused on those who felt dynamic mental or phantom shifts, and was a term that was used well into the 2000s. The term were-mythic was also coined at this time, though never caught popularity, as animals of all sorts had been present and accepted in the community since the beginning. Yes, Horror Werewolves was host to many different types of animals, regardless of wolf in the name. We know this by a surviving practice called werecards. Werecards were user-fillable surveys of information on a were-creature and included a section to self-identify one's stereotype. Notable examples include chimeras, griffins, dragons, unicorns, hybrid creatures of all sorts, tigran, anthro animals, giants, phoenix, centaurs, manticore, and even the infamous Were Pontiac. Yes, the make of car. However, Alt Horror's Werewolves' reign as the community hub would not last, and members were scattered to new forums and personal websites as one of the first and largest of its time unified trolling events destroyed the forum's usage. But all was not lost, as the members scatter brought the newly founded community to the internet at large and kicked off a golden age of discussion, introspection, and awakening. Therianthropy, the wild plains. Out in the wild of the internet, were creatures took their lycanthropy-based linguistics and shared it with non-were creature individuals who asked the question of why. Why where? And why just wolves? While students of Alt Horror Werewolves members would continue to use were-based linguistics for well over a decade, and in some cases into the modern day, such as our current word for shifts, many others took Therian and ran into the tall grass. A commonality between non-humans of the time was, ask 10 therianthropes what therianthropy is, and you'll get 11 different answers. Yet a general consensus shows us that these answers were all on the same page. Twilight Fox in 1998 writes, a phenotype is an integral part of oneself, something which can never be seen as separate from themselves. Therianthrope.org, carrying over from Alt Horror Werewolves FAQ, which was captured on the Internet Archives in 1998, states, Therianthropy is the ability to mentally transform from the normal human mode of thinking and reacting to an animal one. Lynx's Temple in 2000 writes, fundamentally, it means you in some way perceive yourself as occupying the liminal space between human, anthropos, and wild animal, Therian. And in a conversation then adapted from Alt Horror Werewolves, I prefer the word animality or wereside. I myself don't like the word phenotype. It really is a misnomer. According to Winged Wolf in 2003, the varieties of phenotypes is very long, and even includes some animals which are thought to be mythical or legendary, such as dragons and native spirits. Korok in 2004 says, a therianthrope, or were, is a person who feels that they have some connection to an animal. They may think they are an animal inside, or in mind or in spirit, or that they are part animal in this way. The Cloven-Hooved Goddess, also in 2004, writes, Therianthropes are people who share an integral, I can't say that word, sorry guys, connection with an animal in such a way that they believe themselves to be that animal, either in spiritual, mental, or an emotional capacity. And further goes on to state, nobody has the right to claim that dragons cannot be therianthropes. It is up to the individual to choose which label to identify themselves as. Aurora Wolfen, again in 2004, states, there were also weres whose phenotype is not of this earth, like dragons and griffins, though some say these are not weres but otherkin. Aquila, once more in 2004, states, therianthropy is a constant state of being and a way of experiencing and perceiving the world that leads a person to identify as an animal. Mastashina states in 2005, therianthropy is the belief that one is in whole or in part one or more animals in some manner other than physically, and goes on to qualify this with, Therians are those believing to have an animal soul, sometimes also mythical animals or extinct ones. Quill tells us in 2006, therianthropy is a state of being in which the therianthrope exists, lives, thinks, has instincts, and often acts as a non-human animal. Mira, also in 2006, defines it very simply as therianthropy is animality. Project Shift defines it in the years between 2008 and 2010 as the state of being a person who is, feels, or believes they are in part or whole non-physically one or more non-human animals on an integral personal level. True Form Within states in 2009, a stereotype can be any sort of animal, living or extinct, and goes on to qualify this with, over the past couple of years, there has been a huge increase in stereotypes other than wolves, as well as an increase in those whose phenotypes are more astral creatures, such as dragons, elves, phoenixes, etc. Moonsong writes, in the years between 2009 and 2011, Therian is any human that identifies with a non-human animal. They can identify with it spiritually, mentally, and sometimes physically. So where and how did it change? Somewhere around 2006 is where primary sources in the form of cataloged websites begin to wane in frequency. Thus, this is where hard evidence begins to become scarce. We can speculate on why, and my personal theories include the movement of communities from forum-style chat functions to increasingly popular instant messaging formats such as Skype, the loss of internet savviness, and thus the lost knowledge of submitting online information to the Internet Archive, the loss of interest in hosting personal websites, in addition to the loss of hosting sites such as GeoCities and FreeWebs, the closing of once active but later inactive forums, as well as the roiling turmoil of constantly emerging and dying web hosts such as AOL. In 2002, we see the earliest recorded description of what Therians are versus otherkins. Glendarius describes otherkin as therianthropes whose bonded creatures are mythical beings such as dragons and elves. Otherkin are actually con-therianthropes whereby no M-shifting occurs, but they have a constant feeling of being like their bond entity. Granted, while I did not specifically read into otherkin's history, my research into our term's history finds that it intersects at points with otherkin, going back all the way to Horror Werewolves, to be exact. And this is a very early point of time to encounter this, which suggests that the argument of Therian's experience otherkin identify has been ongoing much longer than previously thought. It also displays an early schism between the mythical and earthen definitions, being the earliest definition I was able to find in which distinctly defines mythical creatures as strictly otherkin. I reached out to Orion Scribner in order to hear from someone who was present in the community during that time, and they suggested reading the Field Guide to Otherkin by Lupa, as they recall the shift in definitions around the time she was gathering information to be included in the book. Field Guide was published in late 2007, and one can speculate that it was one, if not more, years in the making, putting the dates of the obtained information in estimated 2006 to 2007. Under the definition section of the book, Lupa defines therianthropy as people who identify as earth-based animal in some respect. She later qualifies this statement with, there is some debate as to whether therianthropy should be limited only to those who identify as animals native to this plane of existence. She does mention that several surveyed dragons identify as Therians, but this is the extent of her touching on this subject. And yet it's the earliest specified definition that I have been able to find that claims Therians are earthen animals only. Considering the Therian community has always had non-earthen animals within it, it's hard to imagine how a community with such strong roots started to oust established members. Lupa's Field Guide doesn't seem to be the origin of the definition, but it is arguable that it is a cornerstone in its proliferation, due to how well it encapsulates the community as a whole, and even continues into today to be recommended as an accurate overview of what it is to be non-human. An even earlier source than Lupa's field guide, and one that had great influence upon her writing, goes by the title of The Magic of Shapeshifting. Released in 2000 and authored by Rosalind Green, the book's contents, of which describe how shapeshifting works in this world, are controversial at best and physically impossible and incredibly discouraging at worst. But it's definitely an entertaining, if dangerous, read, and gives us some insight into some of the most interesting, evolving interactions of the Therian community post-alt horror werewolves. Within her book, Green delves into the physics of how shifters are tied to their species, citing needed access to the energy of the animal in order to assume the correct form. Thus, mythical or fictional animals are impossible forms for shifters to have. However, she does go on to qualify the argument for both earthen animals only, that one would need the energy of the living animal to reference from, and for all species, wherein animals that are nearly extinct or incredibly difficult to find physically, such as the tiger, which is popular in shifters, quote unquote, can still be accessed due to the energy from the collective subconscious and its essential structure. With that said, I unfortunately have no definitive source knowledge of how the earthen animal only definition came to exist, or why the schism began. I only have speculation. Did Green's The Magic of Shapeshifting touch on a real schism in the Therian community that was latent enough I couldn't find evidence for, or was it fabricated for entertainment? Regardless, it was damning enough for Lupa to include in Field Guide, a 101 source for many Therians through the years. So why did it change the community's lexicon? Orion gave me their opinion on the matter, and as it's wonderfully succinct, I'll quote them. Therianthropes have always tended to be defensive about trying to be seen as plausible, whether for spiritual or psychological reasons, and few felt imaginary beings were too implausible. From the sources that I've read on the matter, I agree. The few gate kept the many, and over time it became the only definition. There exists the concept of an online echo chamber. It is a phenomenon in which individuals within a closed community learn about a topic and only discuss amongst themselves, thus prompting all members of the echo chamber to believe they, and only they, have the correct information on the topic. If the echo chamber becomes the primary source of information on a topic, only that information will ever be known by newcomers, as well from those that spread the information beyond the echo chamber's walls. Late in 2008, a burgeoning forum, one of few of its kind at the time, named Therian Wilderness, presented the earthen animal definition to its members. An admin going by the name of Ray Harakti posted, Therians are a type of otherkin. Other kin is just kin different to standard animal and men. And Therianthropes are the branch that are referred to as earthen animal humans. Otherkin are everything considered not to be earthly animals. Other admins go on to qualify that it was the definition used on all of the personal sites that they had seen, and it would become the definition used by the forum even up to today, where it can be found in the forum's terms and definition board. Many in attendance may recognize the name of the forum, as it was one of the most popular forums for Therians through 2015. But it was also infamous for being somewhat hostile to anyone who wasn't earthen animal. Messages and threads through the years showed otherkin or non-earthen animals, such as dragons, joining, being told, quote, "there's not much here for you," end quote, and their introduction post being the last interaction they'd had on the site. Similarly, when individuals argued for non-earthen animals to be able to use Therian, they were shut down in favor of the argument of "this is how it always has been, suck it up," even when objectively shown the forum was being exclusive or outright ignoring community history. The unyielding nature of the users and the popularity of the forum presented the community with only one option, thus locked new community members into only knowing the exclusive definition, not fostering a community that helped others find language that helped them better understand themselves. I'm a Therian. I am a genetically modified hybrid dinosaur. I may have been able to recognize myself in a mirror, but I could never have understood the ramifications of being an unnatural animal. I was an animal, and I still am. I experienced dinosaur drives, instincts, the urge to chirp, roar, bite, swim, hunt. How does that make me any different than a lion, than a vulture, than a dolphin? The term Therian was always meant to describe animals, but it was taken from those of us who don't fit a perfect mold. I joined the community in about 2015, and I learned the Earthen animal definition of Therian. I felt an odd sense of belonging to it, but was shoved out of it. It wasn't until last year, 2001, that I learned the history of the term. So I share it with you in hopes that it helps at least one someone find a piece of their identity that they were missing. And that is the end of my script there. Ah, my throat is so dry. I don't know if I can answer any questions very deeply, but I can and will take any questions that y'all have, because this is a very interesting and just frustrating something, you know, that to know that people who identify with a term have been forced to not use it. Faith. The gatekeeping of the word is so weird. I once got told I shouldn't call myself a Therian because I'm prehistoric. That's exactly what we're talking about, because I created the word Fictarian out of sheer spite after learning about this, because I wanted to use the term but also shove it in their faces that I was taking their term from them. But the more that I've thought about it, the more I just want to use, that was me, yep, that was me, I'm the one, I made it. The more I want to use just the word Therian, because it's so important to reclaim what we have lost. I got kicked out of Facebook groups because Theriomythic wasn't a real word, and obviously my identity was just a troll. I'm so sorry, Paige. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So somebody asked, what is a Theriomythic? So remember how I mentioned people were starting to say, no, these are earthen animals only. People started to attach that prefix of different types of critters. So like mythical creatures are going to be ethereomythic. So dragons, unicorns, things that are non-sapient animals are going to fit underneath a ethereomythic. The term for Therians that are extinct is Paleotherian. I saw someone else mention a different one. Therian's your Pokemon. Absolutely. Yeah. I love meeting Pokemon Therians because it's Pokemon are animals and you cannot take that away from them. Fuck responsibility politics. Who made that sign? I want that sign. Yes, so I'll go back. Therian Mythic, again, is going to be like your dragons, your unicorns, your critters who are non-sapient, but mythical critters that's gonna be where the mythic comes from. Got a Therian them all, I love that. Like, I think my favorite part of researching this panel was reading through the were cards. Were cards, as I mentioned earlier in the panel, were a self-described survey where one could write down what their stereotype is, and it's ancient. It's an ancient practice from back on old Horror Werewolves, and it needs to come back because those things are great. There are so many different types of animals on there. I think my favorite one that I saw was a phoenix. Like, you can't get much more mythical than a phoenix. And they were in the community. Okay, Paige corrected me. Therian mythics can be sapient animals. Paige would know. Paige is the one who brought Therian mythic back into the vernacular. So I'll default to Paige. Stereovag is a very good term as well. But yeah, definitely take Therian if you feel like it matches. That's what this is all about. I'm giving you your weaponry to take it back. Oh, I totally missed if there was a question channel. Are where cards linked in the sources? Yes. They are source number 9. It says where web. That's going to be your link that you're looking at. All of the sources that I've used today do have the little citation number. I couldn't figure out how to get them to link properly, but you can always follow the little citation notes to the link to find more information about back then, to see the full quotes of everything that I quoted today. I even have some on here that were, so like I have links to Therian Wilderness. That one's locked behind registration. You have to register to actually see Therian Wilderness. I only uploaded one screenshot to the sources because it was extremely relevant, but otherwise, if anybody doesn't want to actually sign up for Therian Wilderness and wants to see some of those threads that I saved, let me know. I can DM them to you, so on and so forth. The sources are, where are the sources? They are at the very bottom of my transcript here. So that's going to be in the pins. I also have that linked on my website. It's all the way at the bottom. It's not only sources, but it's also further reading. So, like, there are things on here that I did not quote, but were actively part of my research that you can look through because they're very important. Question: If we really want a meter, when would you stop calling yourself a Therian? If you don't experience animalistic urges, It's a very weird and fine line, especially when you start to break it down just like this, because um, it's so encompassing. We as humans are animals, but we don't get prey drive. We don't get the urge to bark. We don't get stuff like that. Being a normal human can be therianthropic in nature if you're weird enough. Absolutely. Wait, so I could be a Therian even though I'm a vampire because my behaviors are so animalistic? Absolutely. One of my headmates is a super animalistic vampire, and I call him non-human. I could call him a Therian if I really wanted to. Absolutely. I think it's also just a thing of, are you comfortable with the label Therian? Completely. Just as every other label in our community, it is an opt-in. It is actually, it's going to be what you feel is most comfortable for you. Do, 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 do.
I wanted to say 2 things real quick, if that's welcome.
Of course.
As a non-traditional Therian, I really appreciate this panel. And if you want to let anyone come up and speak during the panel, I'd be happy to approve those speaker requests.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to come up and ask me questions, talk about their experiences of being shunted out or whatnot.
Sorry for a second while I phrase this in my head. Sorry.
Gotcha.
You're good.
Hello.
Hi, it's the tism. Just give me a sec.
Okay. I actually created 2 Therian terms for myself, Spiritherian and Phantotherian, because my Theriotypes are very spiritual in nature. They were never physical animals, though I still consider myself a Therian because I experience animality.
I'm also just kind of like skimming the main channel because I've been noticing some things.
I consider my Pokemon kin types to be a form of non-traditional Therianism, at least some of them, due to how I experience them.
Mm-hmm.
I consider my Pokemon kin types to be a form of non-traditional Therian tropy due to how I experience them.
Absolutely. Like, that is... Every time I see a Pokemon otherkin or however they're currently labeling themselves, I'm like, I see you as a Therian.
Yeah. Pokétherian, I guess. That's a cool word.
If you like it and you want to use it and it feels like it describes you well, absolutely take it from the gatekeeper's paws.
Awesome. Do you guys think the Pokétherian is a good word?
I
Does it
like
roll
it
off?
just because it's bouncy.
Yay, Pokétherian! It feels good in my mouth. It feels good.
Very
It feels
bouncy.
good putting it in my mouth.
The very
Okay,
bouncy
I
word.
have
I like that one.
something to say.
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, Vriska.
Yeah, I'm Rian right now. I'm talking. My girlfriend, is an elk. She identifies as an elk. She is an elk in that space. And people have literally told her, like when she said, "No, I'm also human. I don't identify as Therian." They've literally told her, "No, you're a Therian." And like, we are so sick of it. It's so annoying.
Screw 'em. Label
Yeah,
yourself how you want to be labeled.
I started calling
People
myself
can't
a
force you to be
Therian.
labeled. Yeah.
I started calling myself a Therian.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it real with you. Just literally use whatever labels you want, literally out of spite or like if you just want to. Labels are just there to kind of enforce gatekeeping in this community, to be honest.
Oh,
That's why I prefer using the term terminology. That's why I prefer using the term terminology for things I use to refresh myself, because it feels much more like willing. Then it seems more like a thing I'm choosing. Like, yeah, this is the terminology I use for myself.
Mm-hmm. It feels so much better when a word is meant to describe a set of experiences rather than narrowly defining and boxing in something like Earthen animal. That was
That's why I love the word queer. That's why I love that word.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Queers rise up! Queers rise up!
Queers rise up!
Yeah.
Woo!
Sorry for the barking in the background. I am outside right now, and my rat dog is barking.
Oh,
Bark,
that's
bark, bark.
pooping.
I feel like that's very appropriate, though, for a Therian panel.
It is.
Also, I did just kind of want to talk about our experiences, because we were thinking about using the Therian label more, because we're technically fictive heavy, but only for, like, fictional species. And so what we usually run into is, like,
Same here.
within, like, fictionkin or fictive spaces, they're very character-focused, and there's almost, like, nothing towards species, but meanwhile, it's actually more talked about within therianthropy.
For us, it's like an even. We're also
It'll
fictive
just
heavy.
feel less weird for having, like, species from super obscure sources.
We relate because while we do also have a lot of characters, we also have a lot of like species. It's pretty evenly split for us
Yeah.
actually between characters and like species.
Yeah, we almost never get characters. It's almost just species. So it feels weird even calling ourselves, like, fictive heavy, because normally fictive heavy refers to, like, the character fictive experience.
Well, I'm a character fictive, but we also have some of our co-hosts are species fictives.
All three
A
of our
lot of like our
hosts
fictive.
all three of our hosts are character fictives, but we all like identify as Therian too.
A lot of us identify as fictionkin despite being fictives as well.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know Dirk
Most
identifies as
of
both
our
Therian and fictionkin, but specifically because he's part Rainbow Dash.
Can I say something?
Oh yes, sorry.
We're here, we're queer, we're non-human, get a woo to it.
Awoo!
Get a woo to it.
yeah.
Whoa!
Nope, that was
I'm not actually Therian myself, but I just wanted to say that, I mean, the definition I've heard most commonly is kind of the earthy human. But, of course, now I know better that it's more than just that. So, thank you for this.
Absolutely, and
Yeah,
I mean,
like I
I'm
mentioned, that's the definition I grew up with in the community, and it just angered me so much that I had to put this on.
Yes,
Yeah,
same.
that's the
Because
interesting thing.
for a while, I've been thinking about labeling my Vriska from Homestuck Kintype as a Therian.
Hey.
And I was like, oh, but I do get like animalistic instincts from her, but she's not like.
But we have a ton of Ben
the
10 fics
animals,
that are like that.
So
Can I say
does
something?
it count? And then now I'm learning it does.
Who said they
you
wanted
know-
to say something?
You know what
Yeah, I'll
also
just
counts as a Therian?
Thank you.
I think. You know what also counts as a Therian? A My Little Pony, My Little Pony Friendship Magic can if they want.
Yeah, that's why our Dirk, which is one of my co-hosts, identifies as a Therian because he's
Rainbow Dash?
he's Rainbow Dash also. He's Rainbow Dash.
I'm Rainbow
fiction
Dash
kind.
also.
Oh my god.
I'm Rainbow Dash also. Woohoof. Bro,
We have a lot of non-canon ponies in our
Woohoo.
system, too.
May I say
If you
something?
name, like, a series that
Yeah,
has
you may say
non-humans in it, we probably have a fictive from it.
Who said they
Somebody
wanted
wanted to say something.
Me, Mahari.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
One thing that's kind of been going through my head is something that is a little funny considering, cat. But in terms of labels and whatnot, and this goes for gender identity, it goes for sexuality, it goes for, non-human identity, is you put a cat in a box, cat's going to jump right out. You give the cat an option of boxes, and it's going to choose its favorite one.
Exactly. As a cat Therian, yes. As a cat
Exactly.
Therian, yes.
If I fit,
Oh,
I
can I
sit.
also say something?
That's
speaking
something
of
that's really,
Powerhouse
really
of the
important to
Therian.
keep in mind. If you find that favorite box and it's comfortable for you, sit in it. The only time that you really have to be that you have to be mindful is obviously if it crosses borders into closed cultures. But I know that's a whole other panel and whatnot.
Okay. Important addition, you can get out of that box at any point you wish and go into a different box.
Exactly. If
Yeah.
it no longer fits you, you are more than free to move.
Yeah, because I mean, just an example here, I've been trying to work out if I'm fiction kid or coping link, and I'm pretty sure I'm psychological fiction kid. Instead, I mean, of course, both identities are 100% valid. It's just kind of trying to figure out.
No, King,
I
I
am
do
about
100%
to check.
think. Can I say something to someone in chat?
That's fine.
King, if you wish to call yourself a Therian, then yes, you can.
I mean, that's it. I mean, that's all labels are in my, they're just
Also,
self-identifiers. Do whatever the hell you want with them.
Also-
Gave us a topic. How to deal with people who fanatically label Therians as only earthen animals. How to deal with gatekeepers who still exist in the community.
Screw them.
I mean, we deal with it the same way we deal with any other gatekeeper, where we educate them what we can, but we don't try to like
thing you can do.
target them or
My,
make them feel like justified in
Here's my
in any way.
catchphrase. You all know my catchphrase. Fuck them.
Right. Everybody's got an answer. Talk about it. Tell them
Yes.
that no, and then
Worst
right here.
comes
Like,
to
you're not
worst,
going
just block them.
I have
Hold on,
You're not
y'all,
going to be able
that's
to
freaky.
explain this to people if you just like push them out. If they show, especially if they show that they're willing to learn. If you just say it's not my job to educate you, or if you just say no, you're a gatekeeper, then no one is going to actually learn from that.
Yeah, like,
yeah,
don't-
that's true.
The thing is,
Don't be.
While I was doing
if
research
they're being
for this
shitty to
panel,
you, if
Yeah, if you don't have to if they're being like rude to you.
can I talk for a second?
Yeah, like, I mean, don't be horrible about it. But
Can I talk?
if
Can I say something?
if someone
Can I
is
say
being
something?
awful, just block them, boy. That's the best
Yeah.
thing you can do.
Okay, sorry.
But don't be an asshole.
Can I say something real quick? Sorry, just because everyone was talking, I didn't want to add to the
go for it.
cacophony. I just wanted to wait for a second because I didn't want to add to the cacophony.
Yeah. I see.
Okay, so if they're being, like, if it seems to be born out of, like, ignorance or uneducation and not, like, malice, then I think it is good to try and start some sort of conversation with them about it. Because most times it is just born out of, like, lack of education or ignorance. But if it's, like, they're being really shitty about it and they're, like, being actively malicious about it, then, fuck them, bite them.
Yeah, literally.
So when I
like,
was doing research for this panel specifically on Therian Wilderness, I actually contacted Kisota after I read this thread because Kisota went up against an elitist, and it was insane.
Tell me, give us the deets.
It was
Yeah.
so bad. I was
Spill the tea,
so
spill the tea.
angry reading this thread that literally, like I said, when I was done, I went to Kisota. I'm like, you are a god. Thank you for this.
You fought against awful people. But no,
So
genuinely.
basically, what happened is Kisota went and like, hey, this has never been the definition. Let's talk about it. And this person is just talking them in circles. It was so frustrating and angry. If I remember correctly, let me actually, you know what? Let me double check before I misattribute
Gatekeepers do.
something and speak wrong.
That's what gatekeepers do. They talk you in circles in a way to try and, discombobulate you, and so you don't really realize as much how shitty their points are and stuff. They kind of just talk in a circle until you just kind of give up out of almost dizziness.
Yeah, it's not
yeah.
exactly the same. We
Yeah,
get that as a
what the
system like
elites
so
really
much.
do is just
Serafina. Let me double check. Lapori asked when it was. Looks like
Sea lining, yes.
14. The title of the. Let me see if I can actually find the title.
Fuck gatekeepers.
I have so many
Right,
screenshots.
gatekeepers.
Therian
New
Wilderness.
Othercon motto: bite gatekeepers.
Yes.
Basically, yes. Because they
yeah,
suck.
can I say this
Uh,
real
we-
quick?
we need
ignorant.
gatekeepers as well as a fuck respectability politics emote.
We need less gatekeepers in communities and more, headmate, gatekeepers, you know what I mean by that? The headmate can have the gatekeeper role. Like
Who
if you
said-
agree.
It's really
said
funny
they
because
agree?
we're like almost always technically win the debate, but they just refuse to accept that they're wrong.
Reblog
Yeah.
if you agree.
Yeah, I mean
By the
that's that's how all exclusionists act. I mean, I've found it in the queer
Period,
community
Ben
as well, when
Shapiro.
people just kind of, because there was this whole thing 5 years ago about how asexual people weren't like LGBT. They'd literally run you around in circles, and this was when I was figuring out I was ace. I mean,
Yeah, the ace inclusion stuff was fucked up. As an ace person.
it was. I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
it really was.
it has been cleared up now, thank God. But yeah, that was
Yeah, but now they've moved on to something else.
Yeah, it's
fine.
The
now,
issue right now is
and-
what, bi lesbians?
Yeah, I was gonna say that. They
Yeah.
moved up to M-sex lesbians and M-sex gays.
For anyone who has
yeah,
a
it's
wilderness account and wants to see this thread that I'm talking about, because it gives a very good overview of exactly everything that we were talking about. It's called
exclusionists suck.
Terminology from 2014-15, like in between as the year turns over.
M-sex rise up. M-sex rise up.
May I ask something?
Poppy, no,
Yes.
you do not want to see the thread. It was very angering. I have the receipts. I don't like looking at them, even when
I don't want to look at the thread.
Yeah.
I don't want to look at the thread. I just want to hear all the deets, but secondhand. A filtered version of the thread, basically.
It was so angering.
I can
Okay.
tell.
Yeah,
It's
I
just,
can imagine.
Just a quick question. Sorry, excuse my accent. I'm German. And I think I cannot hide it, so I have to sort my throat a little bit.
Don't worry.
So
I like it.
the question
The
the question for me is, where do you think the terminology will lead to? Because the question arises because when I think of what is the terminology and the evolvement of the terminology, what is it for? And in the end, it's a kind of expression. It's feeling we have inside each of us, in ourselves, that we are other in some way or another, and we want to express this. And this is why we use the terminology, why we use a word like Therian trope or otherkin or whatever, because we want to express a picture, a feeling inside of ourselves and frame it, give it a name. And over the years, and the thing is, over the years, so how should I put this? So I've been in the community since 2007, and I've seen up until now, it's really differentiate quite a lot into it, even more and even more. And the question for me is, does it have an end? Will it have an end? And I ask it as a discussion. What do you think? So because in the end, each of us has its own its own experiences in the matter. Yes, that's the German stuff. I'm missing the words. And in the end, because if we would name everything, each of us would have to give their own definition of it, and then it will lead to like an infinite amount of different terminology for maybe the same or maybe not the same matter we're talking about. So
every person's gonna have to have their own dictionary, basically,
exactly. So what do you think? How will it end? And do you think that differentiation will stop at some point?
I don't think it will ever end, because we're constantly trying to find new terminology to help us find more people like ourselves, which is exactly why I went back to the very beginning to show everybody how the terminology evolved. Now, unfortunately, I did have that blank space where I can't find how Earthen animal was ever conceived of, and it upsets me. It upsets, I'm probably sure, all of you, because I would love to have a final answer.
My opinion is that it'll just kind of cycle itself, and that it'll reach a point where there's so many new labels that people just end up not using, and they all die out. We kind of go back to more reasonable labels, and then people start making more labels again. It just kind of cycles like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
the labels die out. There's a very brief period of time where there's a reasonable amount of labels, and then people start making more labels en masse again.
Yeah. If we had to guess, I think the Earthen animal I think the definition probably came from confusion with because werewolf, it's more associated with animals. That's just like the closest guess I can come up with.
I think that labeling, more labels being created, and then people stopping using them, and then more labels being created. I feel like that's also kind of happening with the plural community.
Self-perpetuating,
different terms, organic, so are being created, and I've
I mean,
never seen anyone use
language.
it actually.
No, I mean, language is constantly changing all the time.
Yeah.
Like, you know, words come into being, words get popular, words disappear. I mean, it isn't just limited to alter humanity, queerness, or
There are
the
words that
or
are
being
only
plural. It's
there
all
are
over
words
the
that are only a thing in different cultures. There are like slang and stuff that's specific to a certain area. Language is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
There
like
was
how
actually,
what's the word? It's other human is very common in the French community. It means someone who has a human fictotype.
That's really interesting. That's really cool. Like genuinely. I like your accent, by the way.
That's like a word that only really exists in the French community.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like
My
until
sister,
like
or,
recently in
my
like
host
my
actually,
local.
made a term for Therian before she learned the actual term. And yeah, it was Dutch. It was mensdier, which literally means human animal. Like, yeah. We all
Interesting.
kind of create those words for our experiences before we learn the actual words for it.
Can I speak real quick?
Sure, go
Yeah.
for it.
So in like my like local community, I'm from the American Midwest, so like that sort of area, like where side, where, or like so those sort of associated terms were really common because like I'm from like around the area where like the teenage werewolves in Texas were like really common in the early 2010s. I don't know if anyone remembers that.
Yeah.
I
remember
only
them.
know it because of my research.
Yeah, and
Very
I'm
interesting.
I
pretty
saw
much keeping up.
videos online.
Wait, what was,
Hey, speak up.
the Teen Werewolves?
Sorry, I was yelling at my cat, but yeah, I'm like my local like area has a like I'm not from Texas. I'm just talking about the general area I'm from, but sorry I cannot speak. The tism has me in a chokehold, but
It's okay. I have tism
I
too.
had to run to turn off the air conditioner. Why were we paused?
but like my area has like a huge like teenage werewolf community, so like
Guy that played Thomas.
with that sort of like associated thing is that like the where related terms are like more common. Like I did not start saying like Therian until like 2019-ish because that was when I learned it.
There was definitely a part of history where a lot of terms were being used at the same time that I noticed. Like, if you go back through where I broke down the different definitions through 1998 to, like, 2008, 2009, thereabouts, you can see wares, Therians, shifters, they're all there, and it just depends on what kind of community you're in at the moment, who's using what. And that's kind of why I was a little scared
genuinely
about
really interesting.
presenting this. Because as y'all mentioned, yes, terminology changes. And unfortunately, Earthen animal is how we currently understand Therian to mean, even if that's not what it was supposed to. But it's what the current lexicon understands it as. And it's become its own entity almost, because that's how people understand it. They're not like to go back and look at it is where people get confused. Wait, but there's so many earthen animals in the community when they're being called wares, but before the earthen animal definition was defined, that there is a very easy to see transfer on how it came about. I don't know where it came about, unfortunately, but there's a difference between using the term as it is currently defined and reclaiming what it was supposed to mean. And not everybody is going to use it that way, which is why I was scared to present this.
Understandable.
You should only have to,
why. If you
By
all
the
don't
way,
mind
I
me
wanna-
interrupting you for just a moment, we do have about 1 minute left in the panel, so if you guys don't mind
Oh,
wrapping
wow.
up, there is
Oh,
next panel's in a couple hours.
I
so
guess
if you guys
I
wanna-
guess we
if you guys
can
wanna, like 5
we-
minutes or so, it's fine.
Like,
But I
quick
did,
yeah,
question or-
should
I
we
did
Can I
notice that
howl
a
again?
few
we
just
move to
jumped
one of the
in here, so if they
VCs
wanna
once
speak.
this is
Guys,
done?
By the
That'd be
way,
let's
wonderful.
sit and talk.
As well.
Let me
By the
talk.
way, if I can say it, Das and I run a Therian Discord server called Sanctuary Beyond the Mist that specifically rejects the Earthen animal myth.
Damn straight.
Yeah, I was actually about to
Oh,
ask, does
yeah.
anyone know of like good forums or other spaces that are friendly towards Therians who are
Oh
non-traditional?
no, you're here.
Luna
Yes, it-
just put that in the advertisements. So
Might I throw something in real quick?
yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So something that I've been kind of holding on to. So I noticed we were talking about the whole physical earth animal thing, but I was thinking about it, and so let's go back to, say, werewolves, right? So a wolf is a physical earth animal. A human is a physical earth animal. A werewolf, on the other hand, question mark. So in that sense, when I think of Therian, I think there's actually a substantial tie to that discrepancy or disparity there.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I know,
pretty
and that's the funny thing is that everything in the terminology is based on were creatures. How did we get here?
Where?
It's interesting
did the
because
werewolves
it's like
come
it's
from?
the
Where did this
entity
happen?
that birthed or in theory at least used the term Therian. There's definitely a substantial amount of spiritual effect there, no matter how you shake it.
Let me say something funny.
Mm.
Where did all the where stuff come from?
baboon.
Where did it all
How
go
dumb.
wrong?
I do play drums. I'm legally required to do that.
Before the panel ends, can I howl?
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah. Let's do the group howl.
I don't really have a noise. Let's go ahead and shed.
Join Das and I in Sanctuary Beyond the Mist. All Therians, even the non-traditional ones, are welcome.
Thanks for
Well,
the
yeah,
great
Sounds
panel
okay.
and the great
Thank you very
discussion.
much.
Yeah,
It was
thanks.
really,
That was
really
really
good
cool.
discussion.
Should we move to like
Everyone
VC
woo.
one? We can
Yeah,
continue
if you
talking
guys,
about this.
so I'm
Everyone
gonna go ahead and
woo.
end the stage in just
Everyone
a moment,
woo.
but if you guys wanna
Uh,
go to the VC
I'm
to
not a
have
wolf, but still.
this discussion, that's completely fine. So
What
Absolutely.
VC? What
Which channel?
VC?
Let's move.
What
channel?
VC? What VC?
just any of
What
them.
VC?
Which channel?
VC2.
How about VC1?
Okay, cool. Let's go.
VC 1 or 2?
VC1 sounds
Let's
good.
go.
All right.
Let's
Alright, let's go one. See you, world.
Bye.
Bye.